Welcome back. If you have a webcam and you can turn on your video, could be great. I would like to see your faces. So today, our first lecture, Introduction to Topics. I need to know how many of you are familiar with the Agile methodology. Can you give me yes or no? Are you familiar with Agile? I have only one no. So everyone is familiar with this. Good. Okay. So you're familiar with this, and I just want to be sure about very specific items. Let's review. Number one, our goal here is agility in software. And as we mentioned before, key part of this idea of agility, develop and deliver software fast, is the process. It's not about how fast you can do the programming. It's not about the individual skills that you or your team could have to develop your part. It's more about how you put together the things. And that is the process that you're going to follow. Obviously, if we're going to talk about agility, the process model that we're going to follow is one of the Agile methodologies. Okay. The Agile methodologies. I need to talk about the specifics. Number one, can you help me? We follow process models to develop software. One of those is the Agile methods. Another example you mentioned before, the Waterfall and others. I am going to show you slides. What is a process? Definition, process. Can you agree with that? A process? Steps. A collection of the steps that we follow. We want to do Agile in software. Well, what we can do is to make those steps quickly. The faster we do the steps, the sooner we're going to reach the end, the delivery. That is what we want to do, right? Which are the steps when we talk about process in software? Do you remember? Can I ask you that in the exam and you can select those that apply? Which are the steps? What I am calling steps in the process of developing software. Good. The names change according with the process that you're following, according with the reference that you check. But always, doesn't matter the process. You're going to have something related with requirements. You can call it analysis, requirement engineering, requirements. They are going to be there. Obviously, you're going to have this design thing. Obviously, programming is going to be around. Testing is going to be around. Deployment is going to be in some point, the end. Planning, management, so on. You can consider maintenance as another step, or you can consider just that one as another loop of these steps. Now, the process. Several different processes include the same steps. The important thing is what we do to connect those steps. Right? Connection of the steps. Something that you already know, and I am just summarizing here, is, well, the easy way to connect these steps is just do one, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, and we are done when we reach this one. Like each step is an activity that we need to complete. We complete all the activities, we are done. We collect requirements, we do a design, we program, we test, we deliver, done. That sequence is what you know as the waterfall model. Very simple, classical. The waterfall. You start with the requirements usually. You reach delivery, one process more. Usually fancy words that you are going to read about the waterfall is linear, is plan-based. Do we understand why is linear? Can you explain this idea of plan-driven? Yes? If so, can you help me? Linear, why? Plan-driven, why? For the waterfall.
It's linear because if you finish a step, you tend to not go back and revisit it, right? And
Yeah.
then plan driven because you kind of have like an outline from the onset and you don't make revisions to it.
Yes. You mentioned a key idea. Guys, one key idea when you mention waterfall is you cannot go back to a step that you already complete. And that key idea is also the key idea of having a contract or having a plan. If you work with the requirements and in some point here you have a due date or you deliver all your requirements or you have a due date here for the design, you deliver your design, whatever. There is no way to go back and say, oh, sorry, I forget this requirement. Oh, sorry, the blueprint for the building need to have something fixed. Waterfall is what the people that is doing the buildings around the campus is following. When we compare this software versus civil engineer, I am going to do that sometimes. One of the key ideas is when you are doing those things, you really need a contract and you really need a plan because the budget is connected with that. And therefore, there is no way that you go back and fix requirements, designs, or even the implementation. This one, for software, well, you know the issues. Is the other phase of Agile. In Agile, what you want, the key idea that this didn't work for all the software developing, you want to do changes. That is the key idea that you listen when someone talk about the Agile methodologies, that I want to be able to do changes. Something that I mention to the students usually is, what do you prefer? Do you want to work with Waterfall or do you want to work with Agile in your next project or in your final project? What do you want? Agile or Waterfall for your projects, for your assignments? In this class or in another? That is usually the answer that I receive. You want to work with Agile because Agile is cool. Agile is the new thing. However, think about it. When an instructor asks you for a project, I am going to ask you for a project, an assignment. Do you want me to give you all the requirements from the beginning? And usually the students say, yes, we want to have the requirements from the beginning. Do you allow the instructor to tell you 2 weeks before the due date, 1 week before the due date, change something? And you are okay with that? Like, yeah, okay, anything that you want, we can change it. Not, right? Probably in this point, I am making my note like most of my students, even though could mention Agile is cool, I want to do Agile. In the real world, you want the requirements from the beginning and you do not want changes in the requirements. In the real world, you do not want the instructor to ask for something new just weeks before the final due date. Because if you ask me for changes, then I need more time. My grade, issues. Working with Agile is great, but you need to be aware the contract that you are signing. When you work with Waterfall, not changes. When you ask in a homework, in a project, whatever, that the user do not change anything, that the user froze the requirements, you are asking for Waterfall. Anyway, I am going to show you examples, but Waterfall is useful sometimes. I am going to talk about it. In Agile, you ask for changes and you put those changes in your next sprint. In Agile, if you make sprints every week or every 2 weeks, I can ask you for changes in that period of time. Obviously, I am not mentioning that I am going to ask you for changes one day before because you do not do sprints in 1 day. So we're going to talk about it, don't worry. Usually sprints, 1 or 2 weeks. So in the school, you can do the sprint 1 week, 2 weeks. And as an instructor, I can ask you for changes in that before that period. But we're going to do that, don't worry. Good. But again, if you think about usually your plans in the school, you do not want changes. Not 1 week, not 2 weeks, not at all. And that is Waterfall. Anyway, moving forward, if we want changes, if we want to change something, you just mentioned the key idea, the sprints. What is that? Well, when we are going to do this possible, the changes, we cannot follow a line. We cannot go just from the beginning to the end without the possibility of returning. A key idea with software in the process models. Iterations, or what you know as the incremental model. This is something different from Waterfall. This is something different from Agile. You can do the incremental process model. It is not Agile. It is just something in the middle between Waterfall and Agile. What is the idea with the incremental model? Do we have different activities other than the ones that we already mentioned? Or what happened here? What is the incremental model? Oh, Agile is incremental. We have the incremental model here. We have Agile methodologies here. If you make a timeline, we have the incremental model several years before people think about Agile. And when people think about Agile, and I am going to show you that, they obviously use the ideas from the incremental process model. Which ideas? Waterfall and Agile together for the same project, two different teams. One is going to be working with Waterfall, the other can be working with Agile. The one working with Agile can develop one particular component that the other team is going to use, or the opposite, but two different things. When you are a team, when you are developing your product, you choose one process model in your team for your part. What happened with that part? It could be the final product, or it could be one component in another product. That is a different story. But for your work, one process model. What is the key idea of incremental?
Get something working like really early and then pick up next stuff.
Yeah. That is true, but there is a reason for that. You know what? In the Waterfall, as you mentioned, you have requirements. You have design, full, all the requirements. You finish, move to all the design, and the line until the deployment. What happened with the incremental model? Someone have this great idea of what if we split the requirements instead of having everything together? Give me a subset of the requirements. Give me requirements first delivery, requirements version 1, your first draft, the first page. With that, I can do the design. not all the design, but the first page. Think about a building. It's like, well, give me at least the basement. You have everything related with the basement. Okay, let's move that requirement from the basement to the design of the basement and maybe the implementation of the basement. It's a waterfall, but only with one small part of this. And therefore, it's a small part of this, and a small part of the development, a small part of everything. At the same time, in some point, you are going to have a version 2 of the requirements. Maybe the requirements for the first floor. You can work with those requirements, design, implementation, delivery. If you put these two together, is the two versions that you mentioned before. What is the great idea of the incremental model? The great idea of the incremental model is, well, each of the steps that we mentioned before do not need to be a full step, can be split in parts. We do not need to wait for all the requirements to be done. We can start working with a small part of them. And with that part, we do the full process, the full waterfall. If you put these lines in only one team, here, if you notice, I can draw several small waterfalls. And if I have 3 teams, I can have one team here, one team here, one team here, and this can be done in parallel. However, if I do that, this process model changed the name, and now it's the rational unified process, because I am including this idea of parallel working, multiple teams. If I limit myself to only incremental, here the idea is, well, this team is going to work in this line, but when they finish here, they can connect and start with this and start with this. And if you move this line to something circular, you get the idea of increments. Waterfall, 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 increments, partial deliveries, partial versions. This is incremental, but it's kind of moving forward to the idea that you have about Agile, right? Because this is Agile. Wait, the only thing that I need to do is, instead of having this working with a subset of the requirements, and I do not know if that subset is big, small, or whatever, you can imagine that the next step was, well, let's call this thing with a fancy name, sprint, and let's create the repository for the requirements, and really let's select from the repository some requirements to work. Moreover, let's be sure that we select the requirements that we can finish in a period of time, a week or 2. And with those elements, we are defining what you understand as Agile, another incremental process with these constraints of the sprints and the repositories for the requirements and so on that we need to review. Get the idea. It's an evolution. Integration. I want to talk about that. This is great when you think about theoretical background. Make complete sense. Split the requirements in different parts, work in an incremental way. Instead of 1, 2, or 3 of these, do as many as needed, limit the time to a 1 week or 2 weeks. But then, because you are developers with experience, you are thinking about, well, this needs to be put together, integration. What do we do with integration? Don't worry, something is going to happen there. Integration and other technical stuff is going to be part of the things that we consider requirements? Well, sprint backlog items, but we need to talk about it. Looks good. However, the model, this one, the incremental, well, I can do changes more or less. When? Before starting one of these lines. That is exactly what you mentioned with the Agile. Before starting the sprint. Sprint is the name of this line. If the sprints are small, like 1 week or 2 weeks, for the customer, it's like I can ask for changes and what I request is being done. The customer doesn't notice this difference about, can I ask for changes, yes or no? Yes, you can. It's going to take 2 weeks or 1 week. It's going to be done. For the incremental, if those increments are too long, like 1 month usually, or 2 months, talking about, yes, I can do your change, but whatever you are asking for is going to be done at the end of the semester. That looks like a yes, no answer. Incremental. With Agile is a complete yes. Yes, 1 or 2 weeks. Now, there is an issue here. The big issue is Agile. Well, it's from the 90s. The big marketing of Agile is we're going to be able to say yes to changes from the user. What are the issues? The issues is, number 1, when you have a waterfall, when you have a plan, you have a contract. If you have a contract, you sign your contract. You didn't do your part, I didn't pay you. I give you as an instructor the requirements for your assignment. Here are the requirements. And I give you a due date, and I can forget about you. Here are your requirements, here is your due date, and I am expecting to have your homework on Canvas. Your homework on Canvas is like the product that I am paying for, right? Is the product that I am expecting. What do you do from now to the due date is up to you. You can start working immediately, or you can start working 1 day before. I do not know. And as a customer, I do not care. The only thing that I care is before the due date, by the due date, I am going to receive your homework. And according with the quality of your homework is the payment that you're going to receive, your rates. Complete waterfall. With Agile, there is no plan. No plan means not an official contract. Not a to-do list of things that you need to do. However, there is an informal plan. We need to talk about it. There is a plan, but the plan is not the most important part. The most important part for the Agile, something that usually people forget. What can you do if you have someone working and there is not a contract, there is not a plan about, I am asking you to do this, and if you do not finish here, you are done. You need to check what that person is doing every day. The Nanny Model. The Nanny Model is, instead of giving you instructions and wait for a week or 2 or some period of time for you to finish, I am going to ask you every day, what are you doing? Are you moving forward? How many things did you do today? What are you planning to do tomorrow? If you're familiar with Agile, you're familiar with the daily meetings. The daily meetings is the Nanny Model. Tell me that you're working and you're not procrastinating. I am going to talk more formally about the daily meetings and the specifics, but just to give you the idea. You are moving from the contract to a daily work tracking of the people. It's very, very cool. Agile. We do not do documentation. It's very, very cool. We can accept changes in any moment. From the perspective of the people working, from your perspective, when you work in Waterfall, no one is going to ask you anything from 1 month, and you can be working 1 day before and finish. From the Agile perspective, you are reporting, quotation marks, every day what you're doing. Fine, right? In any way, if you have homework, you're going to work every single day to complete your homework. You never, never, never work 1 day before. The other thing, scenarios. Scenarios with the students, but it's the same outside. We understand Agile. We understand the iterations. We understand the changes. We understand this idea of tracking what the people is doing. 3 key ideas. Scenario number 1. I am going to ask you to do a project, a paragraph for one of those reports. I have a team of developers, master students like you. They were free to select what process model to follow. It's not a project from this class, it's freedom. What do you think of the paragraph on the screen? You are the instructors, you are the managers, this is your team, these are developers working in a project with you. What do you think when you read this report? There is a problem there? Yes, no, which one? Looks good? Can you tell me like that? Fine. I mean, it's a group of people that is going to work with Agile and they are going to do sprints every 2 weeks. Could you say like, we're moving forward in a good direction? Yes or no? Okay. So far, almost good. I agree with the comment on the chat. It's like, something is not exactly perfect, but let's give them the opportunity to, it's like, use a type on text. Looks good. They are promising to follow Agile with the sprints. We continue reading the document, and this is the promise for the sprint 1, February, March. I ask you if you're familiar with Agile. I am expecting that you are. Probably some of you, a small group of you, not. I can talk with you later. I can share with you material. But what I am doing right now is reviewing if you could agree with me, with the knowledge that you have, that something do not look well here. Yeah, that is the main issue here. I just mentioned before this idea of, well, incremental. This is what we call sprints. Sprints involve from the beginning to the delivery all the activities in the process. Sprints, the goal of the sprint is move forward the delivery of the software. And if you want to move forward in the delivery of the software, implementation programming should be there. And well, I could also ask for design, but that's a different story. But some testing, developing, design should be involved in the sprints. When you think about the sprint, be something like this, the concept of sprint is not clear. When you think that you are working in Agile because you are doing this in the first sprint, that did not happen. Okay, This look like suspicious. What about the sprint 2? Same people, same team. And hopefully you get the idea that I want to check. Suspicious. My main issue, guys, is sprint 2 looks like one activity, implementation. Sprint 1 looks like the other activity, requirements. These are not the sprints. This is a description of one activity, another activity. And we can go into the detail about this being short, long, the timing, different story. The details of what is the functionality that you're going to be implementing, other things. The main point that I want to be sure that all of you agree with me, and therefore is an error that you're not going to do in this class, is be sure that you agree that all these sprints, and I show you the 1, the 2, and I am going to end with this, sprint 8. And you can notice it's a 1-year project in some kind of capstone thing. Testing at the end, sprint 8. What you review, all these documents that I am sharing with you, I want to be sure that you agree with me that that document is describing waterfall, not Agile. Agile is not about, okay, sprint 1 analysis, sprint 2 design, sprint 3 implementation, and so on. The last one is the sprint for deployment. If you're connecting that ideas, you need to review your knowledge about Agile. Agree? You are not going to do this. Good. Now, another scenario. And as you are noticing, I am starting today telling you what things are errors that I expect you to do not commit. Scenario number 2, here I do not want to show you examples of students, but this comic thing. What do you think? We're going to do Agile. Agile is great. Very good question, guys. When you are working in Agile, something that we're going to review, don't worry, that is things that we're going to do here, is knowledge acquisition, something that you need to learn. Can be an item, can be something that you can put in this pool of activities for you to select in your sprint. One member of the team, you, the full team, can use one sprint to do one of those activities that are knowledge acquisition. It's valid. You can be working in a software developing team and your responsibility for 1 week or 2, one sprint, could be learn something, because that something is useful for the next sprint, useful for your work. So don't worry for the knowledge acquisition. That is fine. And the same is going to happen with fixing a bug. If we found a bug in the middle of developing something, that is something that can become a requisite, a requirement for the next sprint. In the same way, the changes that the customer asks for, that is something that will become something, an activity for the next sprint. We're going to talk about it. Don't worry. The only thing is, be sure to understand that waterfall, each of the steps in waterfall are not sprints. When you talk about the sprint, you are talking about going from the beginning to the end to create something that you are going to add to the product, or even for learning something or for fixing something. Fix a bug, involve going from requirement, design, implementation, testing. Your sprint are 1 week, 2 weeks, or more. There is not a magical number. It depends on your project, your company, and several times here in the school for this class, I am going to ask you for sprints of 1 week, 10 days, sorry. Because I only have 16 weeks with you, so I need to make this thing happen agile. Anyway, common error, another one. Agile do not involve documentation. No documents with Agile, just programming. Altogether, hacking something. Yeah, Agile have documentation. Thank you for mentioning that. You should do documentation in Agile. And you mentioned exactly the same thing that I am going to put you in a slide later. What Agile tells you is documentation is less important than having the software working. But in any place, the Agile people tell you, do not do documentation. In any place, any book. The only point is what is more important. Talking about what is important, something that I want to share with you is the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto, the key ideas behind any Agile methodology. And 4 things that I need you to remember. We have things in red, we have things in blue. That is my idea of helping you to have a clear vision of these concepts. The red ones versus the blue ones. Number 1, a process. A process, these activities, these steps that are documented and you should follow. People. In Waterfall, we are doing requirements. So no one talk about design or implementation. We are doing requirements. We are doing design. Stop programming. We are doing design. Follow the process. The process is important. That happened in one process model. Waterfall, incremental. When you move to Agile, the first thing that the people that propose Agile mention is, no, the important thing is that the people, you, the team, you are the ones that need to define your process, the particular process that works for you. The process according with your skills, the process according with the product, the process according with the context. You are smart people, and you are smart enough to self-organize. Self-organize. Can you create a team? And can you take decisions about what is going to be your plans? What are you going to do next week, next 2 weeks? How you are going to deliver your product? Hopefully, yes. You know what? There is a problem. You are asking us to define which requirements to start with. You are asking us to define if we start with this or with that. And we need to consider also time for integration or for testing. I mean, you are asking us to take control of the time and the activities that are going to be done and when. Something that I mention to the students always, if you're going to work in a team, and that team is working with Agile methodology. You're going to work in a team, and this team is working with Waterfall. The team that is working with Agile is going to ask you for higher technical skills and also for better soft skills. When you're going to work in a team that involves the Agile methodology, two things that are expected from you is good technical skills, because you are going to be involved in the decision taking, and also good soft skills. You're going to be working, dealing with people. That is not true for the Waterfall. In the Waterfall, you can be the last item in the tree and just follow instructions. Do this. In the Waterfall model, maybe you are not the one having good skills. You can be the one adding the comments to the source code. No one is going to notice that. Again, think about your projects in the school. Think about your capstone project. Think about any software that you develop in the school. The answer is different from every single one of you, but it has been easy to organize your team. How many times have you sent an email to the instructor, Professor, my classmate team is not working, what can I do? I am doing everything alone. I should have a better grade. Okay, you know what? Okay, you do not know how to program in Java. Don't worry, you can do the document or the diagram. You submit. When you do something like that, you're working with Waterfall, not with Agile. Doesn't matter what you mention in your reports. Technical skills, self-organization. Self-organization, I mentioned in the previous slide. Monitoring your work every day. That is what you do. Every day sharing with your team, what did you do and what you are going to do. The freedom is higher. You are free for 1 month working in plan-based way. With the Agile, the responsibility that you have, your duties with your team, not only with the product, but with the people around you, is higher. Anyway, individuals with good skills, they are more important. They should be good. Here, the process is important. Yeah, because the process is defined by the head, the leader, and the ones that are below are used workers without the possibility of deciding things. That is the reason, because the process is important. It's the contract. It's the only way to have these guys below working. Agile, people, good. Second, documentation. You do documentation. Software design, the things that we're going to review here, some of them are class diagrams. It's important. Design patterns, architectural patterns, metrics, and other things. They are useful in Agile. They are used in Agile. Some things need to be documented. However, it is more important to deliver software. If I am doing one sprint and by the end of the sprint, I need to select which activities I am going to complete and which activities I am going to fail to complete, the important one are those ones that are going to impact that we can deliver a version at the end of the sprint, that we can accomplish our goal for the end of the sprint related with the software, obviously related with the programming. But these things are also important and they can be added to the next sprint. They are not going to disappear. This is very important. Agile, one of the key ideas with Agile is the only way that you can apply Agile is if you have a customer that is available to talk with you, to clarify questions in any moment. The reason because you do requirements first in the waterfall is because you need those requirements to create a contract, and the contract is the one that you're going to sign, you and your customer, and you're going to receive a payment or not, depending on whether or not you achieve that contract. With Agile, the idea is, okay, we do not have this document. There is not a contract. We do not require a contract. Therefore, we do not need you, customer, to be sure of all your requirements or all your necessities. We can work, but we need you, customer, to be able to answer questions, because in any moment, if we need to clarify something, we are going to reach you and we're going to expect an answer. Good news, you have that in school. You can contact your instructor and receive an answer. And most of your projects outside, your customers are happy to work with you. So, customer versus the contract. And obviously, the key idea, the last one, the top of the cake, changes are okay. And as you mentioned before, they are okay. They are not going to be immediately. It's not like you ask today, you have it tomorrow, but it's going to be done in the next sprint. If your sprints are 1 week, if your sprints are 2 weeks, in the next sprint, it's going to be done. Help me with this hypothetical scenario. What if you are working in sprints of 2 weeks? You are doing sprints, each sprint, 2 weeks. I am your customer, and I have a request for change something, and it's critical. It's very, 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 very important, high priority. How long, worst case scenario, I need to wait to have my change done? Worst case scenario. Guess. 2 weeks, worst case scenario? Assuming that our sprints are 2 weeks, is 4 weeks. Okay, I like that one. Why 4 weeks? Worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, 4 weeks. Can you explain why? That is true. That is correct. Worst case scenario, 4 weeks. Why? Yeah. Just to put pictures to what you comment on the chat. Worst case scenario, I am going to have done my change here. This is 2 weeks, 1 sprint. I need to ask for this before the sprint start. So I can ask anytime before that sprint starts. Worst case scenario, I am asking the first day of this sprint, and therefore we are not going to change this sprint. We are not going to change what we select for these 2 weeks. It's the first day. So sorry, we're already working, but we're going to put this as a priority for the next sprint. Worst case scenario, I am thinking about, well, you need to wait 2 weeks because we're already working, and you need to wait 2 weeks, the next sprint to be complete. Worst case scenario, 4 weeks. Makes sense. Again, we tell yes to the change, but we're going to do it. But that change do not modify our sprint. Yeah, that is the point. Obviously, 2 sprints, I am asking for 2 weeks. If you do sprints in 1 week, it will be 2 weeks in the worst case scenario. I am asking for a change that is high level of priority. Something that we need to remember is here, before the sprint, you select what to do. And you select things to do, and you select those that have higher priority, right? We need to talk about that, priority of requirements. So making the case for this one to be the most important thing in the world, we calculate this timing. Good. Okay, so Agile Manifesto, this looks like we can do it. You are individuals that can self-organize, hopefully. You do not wait for the last minute to start working in your project, so you can work every single day to accomplish something. You know how to do documents, you know how to do programming. I am telling you that programming is more important than the documents. Cool work. And you have your customer, the TAs or myself, that are going to be helping you and maybe asking for change before your sprint starts. Fine. Remember these key ideas for your exam. Working software, changes, soft and technical skills. Those three things, remember. That is what you sign when you ask for an agile process model. If you prefer a document, Professor, can you give me a checklist of all the things that I need to do in this program? If you want for a specific due date that I am not going to move, all your programs, when you learn to programming, all your homeworks in most of your classes, they were waterfall. Think about it. Okay, now, can we use Agile for any type of software? Yes or no? Any software can be done following an Agile methodology? No, thank you. Let me be clear. Agile do not work for everything. That is the reason because you still review waterfall in the school. There are a lot of software outside that need waterfall, B-model, spiral, and other process models that you know that are plan-based. Okay, I am not going to talk about them. Let's focus with Agile. Which kind of projects can use an Agile methodology? In which kind of projects using Agile is a good idea? Which companies are using Agile? What they do? What are the products that they develop? I am going to tell you this. Small to medium-sized projects. Those examples that you are mentioning on the screen are examples of that. Guys, any web application, any of them, any phone app, any of them, they are small to medium. I am talking about the web part. I am talking about the mobile part. Maybe there is a system in the back, but that is a different story. Think about the bank. All the software that controls the transactions, the money, that software is a complete different thing than the web page of the bank that you are using. Two different products, two different process models. Probably all the software that is in the back, the software that controls the transactions and so on, maybe it's COBOL, maybe it's a programming language that do not exist now. And obviously what's done with Waterfall. Yeah, but you're doing the web page and that is something that you could do with Agile and you're using other technologies, maybe including JavaScript, whatever. Similar thing with flight control. One thing is the software that really control the airplanes, and a different thing is the mobile applications or web applications that you use to schedule a flight. Different things. The medium, the small ones, are the web, the phone. Moreover, they are small and they are not mission critical. They do not involve human lives. When you think about something that is mission critical, you remember your process model is a spiral, period, mission critical. risk analysis. If you think about something that involves human life, probably waterfall, probably be model. You do not do agile. The key idea, guys, is if you're developing software and that software is going to be involved with human lives, you want the requirements from the beginning. Moreover, if that software is going to deal with human lives, for sure, there are going to be some government people involved in checking what you're doing, and therefore you need a contract and a specification. And that is something that usually you achieve with a waterfall process. So web, mobile, things like that, small things, Agile is a good idea. And the good news is if you're thinking about Silicon Valley, if you're thinking about Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple, and so on, the kind of software that they create is in this category. They work, obviously, with the Agile. Deliver the software soon. There are no human lives involved. There are no mission critical things. So that is the reason because Agile is cool. There is a lot of people using it for this particular kind of project. Now, good things and bad things with the Agile. Good things. The first thing that you do if you want to work with Agile, and we're going to review that, is to split the problem in parts. And you know what? That is good because you are going to understand what you are doing. Moreover, not only you, like the leader or the boss, but a group of people. And a group of people understanding one problem is several brains working together, and they are going to work better than only one. Communication skills. If you work with Agile, theoretically at least, you're developing skills that in another process models are not relevant. Are you good communicating with your team? Are you good working with people that is not your friends? Can I create teams randomly and you're going to figure out some way to work with these people, to establish rules internally for communication, working, and maybe grading each other's? And hopefully the answer is yes. Right? You can do it. Hopefully. And obviously the key, delivery. You deliver software. You deliver something that works. By the way, let me be clear here. Even though I am not teaching you how to do programming, every single project that you submit, my expectation, the expectation of the TAs is that project is going to compile and that project is going to run. If the project do not compile or the project do not run, you receive a 0. Can we agree on that? Because you're working in Agile and each time that you do something, you review. If you're not able to submit the final solution, well, you can submit something that was working before. Do not submit something that is not working. This is not a programming class. Manage your source code. You're going to have access to GitHub later. Well, things that do not work with Agile, things that you need to be aware with Agile. As I mentioned before, because the documentation is not important, the main critical thing that happens with Agile is if you do not create documentation, the maintenance of the software, the possibility of modifications in that software is going to be difficult. Moreover, in general, and this is not only Agile, this is any single project that is iterative. In every single project, something that I need you to be aware, and you're going to notice this in the practice. Can you agree with me that you can develop a piece of software, and then I ask you to modify that piece of software, or maybe to add something else? You can add that something else. And then in another sprint, I ask you to do something else, modify or add or remove. You can add something else. If you continue doing this, if you continue doing sprints, modification, adding, the quality with the time, go down. There is a rule. You work with a project, and if you're working with this iterative model, if you're working, adding things, modifying things, adding, changing, and so on, that is the idea with incremental and agile, the quality is going down. Faster or smooth, depending on the project. The quality go down. The quality go down, and in some point, you're going to reach this point in which nothing can be done, and you need to start from scratch. The operating system in your computer is a very good idea of something that is done incrementally. And always, 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 you reach the point in which a company tell you, you know what? Everything that we have before, bye. We're developing this new product from scratch. Now, where we start? How do we start with Agile? Well, can you agree with me that the first thing that we need to work in an Agile project is figure out what the project is going to be, figure out requirements? Yes? So the next thing that I need from you is to be sure that you know how to identify requirements, that you know what is a requirement. Tell me, what is a requirement? It's the same that a customer need or a customer necessity or a customer wish. Yeah, that is true. We have more flexibility with the requirements. Yeah, we're going to check that. But what is a requirement? Yes, thank you, Kamal. Okay, that is the main idea. Guys, something that I need all of you to know, because the first thing that we're going to do is start with the requirements. The requirements are going to be the beginning for all the Agile process. With the requirements, we can start thinking about our sprints and split the work in the different people and the team. That is going to be the beginning. I haven't talked yet about the specifics in the process, but the first thing that I'm going to need is requirements. And the first thing that I need, therefore, is for you to be sure that you know what is a requirement and what is not a requirement. The key idea, as your customer, when I ask you to do something, what I am speaking is not a requirement. What I speak, what I tell you is my necessities, my needs, my wishes. You are the ones that need to create the requirements. And 3 key points, well, there are more, but right now is if something is a requirement, is something that you can test. Test, measure, verify, use the word that you want, but it's something that can be reviewed. It's something that have a criteria for it's done or not, it's working or not. Second, is something that is not ambiguous or is clear. It's something that everyone understands, clear. Okay. The other one, and I am going to talk more about the traceability later, but the other thing that is important is something that is small. When I speak to you and I ask you for doing something, your first work is for whatever idea I have, you need to create your requirements, and each of them should be this, this, and this at least. Looks like very easy, right? So tell me, what if I tell you that I want you to program in Java the Pac-Man video game? Done. That is my problem. I give you a requirement. I want the Pac-Man video game. That is a requirement. Question in your exam. I want the Pac-Man video game. Is a requirement? Yes or no? No. Thank you. Great. No. That is what I want. It's not a requirement because they didn't follow these ideas. Now, your work. Can you transform my idea of I want you to do the Pac-Man video game in Java to requirements. How many requirements? Examples of requirements that are going to be involved in this idea. Requirements for the Pac-Man video game. Good thing, and the only reason because I am using this video game is because I understand the Pac-Man video game. All of you have knowledge of what this is, right? So I am talking about something that you know. So here the problem is not to explain the idea. All of us know the idea. The problem is put that idea as requirements. More or less, having a ghost. Can you agree with what is on the screen? Number one is, I would like to have a ghost. Okay, those things. Moving the player, yes. The levels, the maximum number of enemies, all those things are. I give you an idea. I want the Pac-Man. And some of the things that you are doing on the chat, and you can read, is you are reaching the point of the requirement. And other things are kind of sub-ideas here that you can still split. These are requirements. These small things that can be verified and measured. These are requirements, but in order to move from the problem to the requirement, sometimes we're going to be here with ideas in the middle, epics and themes. We're going to talk about them later. But with the Pac-Man requirements, let me tell you this. Something that you can measure, something that is small, something that one developer can do in one sprint. Think about those three things. And if something covers those three things, it's a requirement. For the Pac-Man, I want the ghost. You mentioned that on the chat. What about being more clear and the requirement is draw a ghost? Is this something that can be verified? Is this something that one developer can do in one sprint? Is this something small? And hopefully your answers are yes. Java programmers, what can you do to draw a ghost on the screen? Hopefully you are thinking like, well, in Java, we need a class. That class could be a panel. That panel could have a paint component method. That paint component method have a graphics thing. I can use the graphics, and with the graphics, I can do draw oval, and the draw oval could be yellow, and well, that is my starting point. Drawing the Pac-Man is one class, one method with 10 lines, 5 lines. That program is something that I can test. That program is something that I can do in one sprint. Done, one requirement. Another. What about moving? Because so far what I did was drawing. There is a requirement for moving. That is second requirements. Wait, it's not the same. No, it's not the same. Drawing is make the shape of the character. Moving is basically create X and Y coordinates. And if we're thinking about the integration is, well, the class or the method creating those X and Y coordinates need to put those numbers or share those numbers in the method that is going to draw. And because you are good developers, you can understand that what I am talking about is this guy receives parameters or have setters and getters, and this guy is just going to send messages. Two things to do. Two different people can do it. Two requirements. I am thinking about the developing. That is the good thing about having everyone involved in the requirements is we can be thinking about what are the requirements, and we have this vision of, well, this should be small to be implemented, and all of us have an idea of how this is going to be implemented. Similar to requirements you can have for the Pac-Man. However, for the Pac-Man, the moving is going to be a little bit different because it's not path automatically created, random numbers or artificial intelligence, but it's going to be more like listeners for the keyboard. And then you have another's that you mentioned in the chat, the maze. What should happen when two elements have a collision? What should happen with this score that you mentioned? You have the idea, right? Homework. Can you work in teams of 4? You can do it individually if you want, but my request is maximum 4. Can you make teams 1, 2, 3, 4 people, and working with your team, create a list of the requirements of this game? Before we disconnect, how many requirements do you think this game has? How many? I mentioned 2. How many are going to be in a list? Give me a number, guess. More than 10. More. Yeah, I like that. I usually put 25, but it's like you mentioned, around 20. This is giving you an idea of what I am asking you. I am asking you to be a team of 4, and I am asking you for 25 requirements. Guys, I am asking you for 25. You can give me more, not less. But the important thing is, give me requirements. Give me things that follow the rules that we mentioned before. For instance, do not tell me that requirement, it is a requirement. What is the problem with it? It is clear, ambiguous, exactly. So give me 25 at least. You can do more. I am asking basically each of you to do 6, 7, something put together, but good requirements. This is wrong. Any of these ideas, complete at least 25. It is clear. I am going to open a link on Canvas. You are going to have the link open, due date before our next lecture, because I want to review this with you in the next lecture. Good? Any question? Perfect. See you next week, guys. Thank you.